All right, we're going to go ahead and get started then. So as I mentioned, this is the collaboration and engagement through breakout rooms. I'm Christina Churchill, and I will be kind of moderating this discussion. I am the Academic Technology Director for the School of Business, and I'm happy to be here and just kind of put everything together as far as these webinars. And this particular one is going to talk about collaboration and engagement that seems to be a daunting task in online and in the SMUFlex world. And so we're going to discuss how you can create this collaborative environment in your classroom and discuss not only breakout rooms, but how you can keep your students engaged to optimize learning. So I will go ahead, and Kathy, if you would like to introduce yourself, and we'll kind of go around, and if you want to tell us your name and what you teach and just a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm Kathy Hayes. I teach economics. I've been here since 1985.
Nice.
I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Bivin Sadler, and I received a PhD from SMU back in 2014, and then was very lucky to have the opportunity to become a lecturer in the stat department at the time that they started the MSDS program, which is a completely online Masters of Data Science program. And so I worked half and half on that. And then in 2018, I went completely onto the online MSDS side, and have developed courses there and have taught there ever since, and still do some moonlighting over in the stat department.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Elena Borzova. I'm from the mechanical engineering department, and I've got my PhD from SMU in 2001, and I've been teaching quite a few courses in our ME department since then. And I'm also an undergraduate advisor in our mechanical engineering department.
Great, so thank you. So let's talk a little bit about collaboration. So when everything kind of turned upside down, our world turned upside down this past spring, what did you do to continue your collaboration in your classrooms?
Okay, I'll jump in.
You guys jump in.
I'll start us off. Yeah, so I'll always remember March of 2020. That spring break was, I think we all will, and exactly what we're going to do. And really, I had noticed this in the years before when I was very hesitant to get into online teaching, as I mentioned back in 2014, because until then, it was very much an impersonal, or at least that was my experience with it, a very impersonal relationship. And we were using something called Adobe Connect, where I quickly noticed that not only like we're in here right now, where you can kind of get the feeling with Zoom, and then again, Adobe Connect, your style and your personality and energy can really come through the computer, and you can do things online that you can't do in even in the classroom. So there were some certain advantages if to identify and take advantage of. One of those being this breakout room. And so I tried to model it from what I knew and we had polished over the last 6 years since 2014 was what everyone knows is a lot is the reverse classroom, but with the async material. But it's, we've heard a lot about that since then, but I do still believe that for me, that there is, there's a lot of different ways to do async and to do the reverse classroom. So anyhow, my students would watch a series of videos that I would produce, especially for them, and then they would do an assignment. So they would do, maybe like most of the work in the class was done before the live session or before the class period that we would meet on Zoom, so that I didn't really do much, if any, lecturing on Zoom. They would come in and they were already invested, and they were already, I had a class of 120 in my stats class that semester. So they had already done the problem. Maybe I recommended a couple of hours, and I had my TAs go through and make sure that everyone had attempted the problem. It was not a requirement to have completed with the correct answer, but it was a requirement to have put a significant amount of effort towards that. And lots more to talk about that, but that's the general idea. Then they would come into class with questions. How did you do it? How did I do it? Did I get the right answer? Are there more than one right answers? Then we'd go to breakout immediately. And they would discuss it. Then we'd come back in. And I've got some examples to show on this if we have time, but we come back in, I give my solution. And typically I found I'd have 3 in the very beginning. I had 3 dialed up, problem, breakout, solution, problem, breakout, solution, and then maybe do one on their own. In a 50-minute class where I understand now I think we're down to 45 minutes. I only had time for at most 2 of those. So it goes by really, really, really fast. I always recommend to have more than, don't run out of things to do, but that's my style. Anyhow, that's the kind of kernel of collaboration that I stuck to, and that I'll stick to again this semester as I teach a different class here on campus.
Awesome. And by the way, and I apologize for not saying this earlier, if the audience, the attendees, if you have questions, there is a Q&A button down at the bottom or a chat button. Feel free to post any questions you have, and I will go ahead and let the speakers know the questions. So if you have anything in particular to ask them. So Kathy, what about yourself? How did you transition in this collaboration? Then all of a sudden you're online. How does that translate for you?
Well, I was one of the very fortunate ones. I have administrative leave in the spring.
Oh.
But I have practiced the flipped classroom since, probably for the last 8 years. I'm a member of the Team-Based Learning Collaborative, if that's what it's called. And so I've flipped my classroom so that to me, it was pretty intuitive. I give a lecture, I tape it, throw it out there, and then we go into breakout rooms to solve problems. And they have, depending on which class, I have some deliverables that the groups have to do. And so sometimes it's not just the problems, but they have to do a presentation or they have to do an annotation. It depends on which class I'm in. And they have been quite successful when I went online this summer. The only drawback that I saw from going from face-to-face to this breakout room is that when I pop into a breakout room, nobody's talking. Whereas if I'm in a face-to-face situation, I can usually hear what's going on. And if I hear something that sounds pretty confused, or I can go over there and kind of gently prod them towards the next thought process. And so I wish there was a way to be a fly on the wall in those breakout rooms so that I could kind of hear what's going on, so that I could help them think about the problem in a better way. So, but that's, the summer wasn't too bad.
So let me, and I'm going to step back a second, because I kind of made the assumption that everybody kind of knew what a breakout room was. So let me explain a little bit on what a breakout room is for those participants that maybe didn't even teach in the spring and are not familiar. So Zoom has the, the capability of breaking your students up into small groups. You have the ability to choose, okay, how many groups you want, how many students are in the groups. You can randomly select this breakout room, or you can pre-assign it. So then the students, if they're working on a specific, maybe a project that lasts for a longer period of time, they can go in, you can pre-assign it, and they're always going to the same breakout room. So just know that you have those capabilities in Zoom. And so when we're talking about breakout rooms, that's what we're talking about. And as the person that is the host of the breakout, of the meeting, I can jump between rooms to rooms and join the conversation. Within the breakout room, you have the ability to share your screen. They can do the whiteboard, and they're just talking amongst themselves. So just like now we're in a group of 4 of us, we can talk and this could be our breakout room, or I can divide the breakout room and just have 2 people, and then they can talk amongst themselves, share the screen and so forth. So I wanted to make sure that you know, the audience knew what that meant exactly. So, all right, let me, and if you want, and I don't want to mispronounce your name, Elena, is that right? Okay. So tell me how you used breakout rooms, you know, during your transition. What worked for you in transitioning to remote teaching from this spring?
Okay, so I was also fortunate because we've been offering online courses through Lyle School of Engineering for more than 20 years, and I've been teaching online courses during all these years. So I've got students from different parts of US and sometimes outside of US. And we started to offer these courses using videotapes. And now we've got the new technology. And at that time it was more challenging. Now it's much easier. And definitely with breakout rooms, it makes it's easier for us to talk to students. And since I'm teaching an engineering course, we need to discuss some solutions, and I need to know what's going on and if they need help. And I've noticed that breakout rooms are quite useful and extremely helpful. So I use breakout rooms almost every class. And if I have a small size, then definitely it's better. I'm talking about the class size, but I use these rooms a lot. And they're very helpful because I can discuss some questions. And I've noticed that first students, they're not comfortable with these rooms, but once they realize that they're just, let's say, talking to me, and they can ask these different questions, and they can clarify the certain subject, they would actually ask me to create a new room and to see if I can help them more and more.
So we did get a question, and from how do you make a breakout room? In the simplest way, if you want to create a breakout room just on the fly, on your meeting controls. Now, as a participant, you will not see this, but if I'm the host, down at the bottom where you have mute and stop video and so forth, there is a button that says breakout room. If it's not displaying in there, there's a button that says more, and then you can select breakout rooms. And then at that time, you can say, okay, well, I need 5 breakout rooms. I want it randomly, or I can select who goes in what room. So that's how you would initiate a breakout room. That's kind of random. What I found is if you start a breakout room and then you bring everybody back together and then you do the breakout room again, within that meeting, it keeps the people in the same group unless you tell it to randomly change it. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. But that's how you quickly do a breakout room kind of on the fly. Okay, so talking about that, there's pre-assigned breakout rooms and random breakout rooms. What has worked for you guys? What works best? How do you group people together to be as collaborative as possible?
I cheat. The team-based learning collaborative recommends random assignment, and I don't do random assignment. I try to get at least an A student, a B student, and a C student in each group. And what I've seen over the years, not 100%, but 90% of the time, those C students are, well, they're probably actually D students, but they're able to come along with those better students when they have someone to talk to and work with through the problems. And so who's the physicist, Mazur, that's at Harvard, developed this particular think, pair, share thing. And that's the basis of the teams, is that they stay together, they have deliverables, they work on problems, sometimes they become study buddies, but that I choose them on purpose, so that I think that everybody needs to have at least one superstar, one medium star, and one no star.
Awesome.
And so they don't know that they're chosen that way, but it's obvious to me when they get in their groups.
Elena, what about yourself? How do you?
Well, I usually also use pre-assigned rooms. the same way that Cassie does. I think it's a very good approach.
Bivin, what about yourself?
So I use random assignment. Mine was a class of 120, and I tried. So I break them up into. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. I kind of gave you the every class period with the async and the 4 live session and that kind of rhythm. But I also had them do a project, which fitting back at the time, it was just, we were trying to get some handle on the data. So it was a COVID-19 project on how every student, I got a really nice data set now on 1,200 students of all around the world that they found in their opinions on how school was run and how their classes were run with COVID-19. So what I had groups of 3. And so I wanted them to, one class period, to all go out and get in these pre-assigned groups. And it was going to be all, fancy and everything. And, admittedly, as much as I love the technology, I wasn't able to master it. And I know that a lot of people were. I would just be, my note of caution would be to really have practiced it and really get to know. I've got a lot of colleagues that have smaller classes that actually used it with great success. But with 120, if you have even 20, of your students that didn't get assigned there, you're going to be running around trying to put everybody into rooms because they're just going to be hanging out there. And I only had, just admittedly, 30 to 40 when I hit go. That somehow you have to have their ID. In order to pre-assign them, you have to have the idea that they signed in with, and then they have to be signed in as that ID for it to know where to place everybody. And with 120, I couldn't get everybody. Nobody knew what they were signed in or not and what their ID was. And so I just, and it was spring of 2020. So I probably will do that in this next class that I have that's only 30, but beware and really, really practice it before you get in there. It would be I do it random in that class, long story short.
So this summer, I ran into a big problem is that I told them on the syllabus, and I told them the first day of class, you have to go through your SMU Zoom or you won't get in the proper room. In fact, you won't get in a room at all. And so this semester, what I'm doing is that I will expect you to be logged in on your SMU Zoom. And because I take attendance in the group settings, that if you're not in there, it's going to be your fault because you didn't log in correctly. And so I'll have to see whether that actually works. But I think the bigger the classroom, the harder that becomes. And so this will be substantially larger classes in the fall than I had this summer. So it may not work.
Yeah, so we had a question come in, and maybe this is for Bivin, but I have a person here, he's teaching 280 students. How would you recommend handling breakout rooms for somebody with that many students?
Yeah, I saw that come through the Q&A. So yeah, that's pretty remarkable. So what I would recommend if you wanted to do breakouts, again, breakouts are amazing, right? I mean, you could never break 280 students into groups of 3 and get them back in an hour. At least I couldn't. There's desks moving and paper flying and all this conversations happening. Here, you snap your fingers, they're in groups, snap your fingers, they're back out, and everybody, didn't have to move a muscle. So I would recommend doing it. You're never, I like to kind of, to Kathy's point, to pop in to each one. You're not going to, in groups of 3, you have almost 100 breakout groups. You're not going to be able to pop into each one, but you can make your TAs co-hosts if you have TAs. And so what I had was I said, hey, TAs, I didn't want us all bouncing around the same people. So I broke our roster up into different groups and said, you've got breakout rooms 1 through 10, I've got breakout rooms 11 through 20, so on and so forth. And so the TAs and I would bounce in and out of breakout rooms. And I know we have varying experience with breakout rooms here, but they can call you from within the breakout room. So they can call the professor and it'll just come up on your screen and you click it and it goes right to where somebody would have a question. So so those are 2. And a lot of times the students don't know that. They don't know, and I'll also tell you, we talked about earlier, again, if you say it once, anything you think's important, I would say every class period, 2 or 3 times, and put it in writing as well. But, this is a knock on me. In the spring, I just assumed I said it, and I've kind of been showing it, and you've had training on it, but you can't assume any of that. Students didn't know how to share their screen. And so I would go into the Zoom room, and they're just sitting there staring at each other. And I'm like, share my screen. How do you do that? I don't know what, I'm not sure what to do. So, so making sure from day one, maybe that everyone knows how to share their screen, because it's going to be tough to be in this collaborative breakout room if you can't share what you're working on. So that's what I would recommend. Long story short, I definitely recommend, unless you can do it, random assignment, breaking the TAs up so you have somebody there, letting them know that they can call you from inside the breakout room, and making sure that they know the functionality, such as sharing their screen when they get in there.
Great points. Thank you. So we had a question come through that it was mentioned that the breakout rooms can be used for attendance. Can we expand on it? But
that's not what I'm doing.
Okay.
What I'm doing is I'm making sure that they're actually there, and they don't have to be there for the entire lecture, but they just have to be there for their collaborative work that I'm giving them. And they know ahead of time when that collaborative work is going to happen. Maybe not where but they'll know if a day we don't have collaborative work, they don't have to be in class. So I don't take attendance that way. But the collaborative work is so important to the deliverables that they have for their end of course grade, is that I can't have some of them show up and some of them not. And I've always done that when I was face-to-face, is that if you don't show up, you don't get the grades for that day. And so that's how I use that. In terms of attendance, it's not as since I'm not doing flex, I'm going to be remote, that I think that we can do that. Now, I did have 2 students this summer get COVID, and 1 student was in China. And so that requires some adjustment. If they're too sick to get on, then they're too sick. And it's kind of hard to tell if they're too sick, but I knew one of the students already, and so I knew that this was probably the case for him. But I think that that's the hard part, is having attendance that has a lot of points with it, right? So these are very small points, but just try to enforce that the collaborative work is very, very important to the classroom success.
Now, I do want to mention kind of on a technical side. So if you were wanting 100% accuracy in attendance, you need to require registration of your course. If you were doing pre-assigned breakout rooms, you need to require registration of the course. And when they register, they need to register with their SMU email address. So that will make that process much easier. So when you're setting up your Zoom meeting, there's that little checkbox, registration or require registration. And then when you send the meeting invite, they'll have to click on it and register, just like you guys, the participants, registered for this webinar. The great thing is it'll send them reminders, hey, don't forget to attend your meeting. But then you're able to get an accurate report under Zoom of participation, under reports, when you're logged in, under reports usage report, and you'll see your meeting and you'll see your participants there. So that will guarantee your listing as far as participation. And then you'll have the opportunity to do pre-assigned breakout rooms, which if we have some time at the end of this, I'll quickly show how to do that. But
is that when you set up the classroom meetings, or is it a setting on the settings button?
When you set up your classroom meeting, so it's unique to your classroom meeting. Yeah, and they only need to register one time. So if you have a meeting that reoccurs, they only register one time. You only checkbox that once, and then you're set.
Christina, you've lost your. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Ah, okay, hold on.
Getting more faint.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I don't know, there's something wrong with my computer. It automatically changes the setting to the audio. So I forgot, I don't know where I left off or what you heard, but
How to set up the required registration.
so required registration only needs to happen one time, and it's just a checkbox when you set up your meeting, your Zoom meeting. You just check it once, and then when you look under invitation, like the URL invitation you normally give your students, and when you click on it, it's actually a registration, and then each student will have a unique URL, and they only need to register one time. They do not need to register multiple times. It actually asks you when you set it up which way you want to do it, but kind of shying away from the technical side, tell me, and Elena, maybe you can help me with this. How do you keep a breakout room? Let's say you go into a breakout room and it's complete silence. Like, how can you help these students engage and collaborate? What are some techniques you've used?
Well, but for example, in my case, they have to discuss a certain solution to the problem. And that's why if they're stuck, I will help them a little bit. And then they can start the discussion. And then I can leave that room and then I can go to the next one. And since I usually incorporate these breakout rooms during the class time, they know that they have to be done soon. So that's why they need to do it as soon as possible, and they have to start the discussion as soon as possible so they can complete the assignment on time.
So they'll have a deliverable they have to, do they turn that in to you? Is that something that's turned in?
Yes, it's like sometimes it's like a quiz. So they have to submit that certain solution, and definitely they are interested in completing that as soon as possible.
Okay. What about yourself? What about Bivin? What do you do?
So it's very similar to what you would do in a real class setting. So there's a couple of things, you can bounce it, you get in there. And again, a lot of times it's as simple as they just don't know how to share their screen. So they couldn't, they have a hard time working on it. So I say, hey, here's how you share your screen. If I say, have you finished the problem? Sometimes they have, and I say, can you describe it to me? And then we can walk through and find those issues. Another thing that I was thinking of as that kind of came up is, of course, they can call you from inside, and I would really mention that, but you can send messages to everybody. If you haven't ever used breakout rooms, in there, you can bring up, it'll say like send a message, and you can send a message and broadcast that to everyone. And as soon as you hit close rooms, it gives them a minute. And a lot of times my students at the very beginning just don't realize that. They don't see you have a minute. They see come back to the main room. So I'll oftentimes give them a note that says, hey, 2 more minutes left, 3 more minutes left. And then I'll say 1 more minute left, and then I'll hit the close button. And then they've got the 1 minute left, because I'll go back to the main room and everyone's there. And they're like, oh, we didn't have enough time. But you still have another minute. So, but yeah, very much the same way. Just ask them questions. And that's the beauty of the breakout room, is that it's like you're really talking to somebody in there. So it's pretty simple on my end for that one.
All right, well, what about engagement tips and tricks that you would have to keep your students engaged through collaboration, or really just other tips and tricks that you have used for online, or maybe something that could be used with SMUFlex that you would recommend?
Can I jump? I'll jump in with one really quick. Okay, yeah. One is that I wanted to find a place to work in is, you've got these poll questions. Everybody loves a good poll, but that sometimes takes a little bit of overhead and might just come to you right in the middle of a lecture. Like, oh, that'd be great. And we had this discussion. One thing that I found works really well is just the chat box. So if you say, hey, I got this question, what do you think for MIME statistics? So, as a z-score, as a p-value of 0.005, we're going to reject or fail to reject. And that's often a question that's becomes really easy, hopefully by the end of the semester, but that is commonly missed even on the final sometimes, unfortunately. So I can say, I can pose that question and people can reply privately or publicly. And so you could just get this, and you get an idea if people have it or not. If they say reject, 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 then great, and I'll move on. And I didn't need to make a poll question. But then if I see fail to reject, reject, fail to reject, reject, or whatever the yes, no responses, I can see those super quick. People that responded not privately can see that they're not alone in thinking the right or wrong answer, and people that want to go privately, previously they wouldn't have answered at all, but now I get the input on that. So it's a way to poll the class from my own point of view, and sometimes give them some, make them feel more comfortable, super fast and super engaging. So there's one tip that's worked for me.
And by the way, on that, on a technical side, and I think you have to turn this option on in your settings, but you have the ability of seeing or getting a digitized, and I think it's in a text format of all of the things that went through the chat. So when you go under your recordings, if you have that option turned on, it'll say chat on there, and you can download the text file of all of the chat that went on. So if maybe a requirement is, well, I want you active in the chat while we're doing this, you can easily get that and then be able to sort it by student or so forth and see kind of their participation. So just a side note, if you wanted to get a good gauge on who's speaking and who's completely quiet on there. So what are some other things, Kathy? Do you have some other tips or tricks that you've used for engagement that you think about you could possibly use in this SMUFlex or online? Well, I guess you're teaching online, but.
Yeah, well, no, I think that I teach public sector economics. And so we do lots of role playing of, okay, you're the mayor. Okay, you're the governor. Okay, you're the president. Or you're a senator or something like that. And those sometimes have the ability to get some really nice discussions going. Again, I have, compared to Bivin, I have relatively small classrooms, so those kinds of discussions are pretty straightforward. I've also done the role play in the breakout rooms because those are, role plays don't have a definite right, definite wrong. It depends, all the policies have pros and cons associated with them. And so that's one of the things that I try to do when appropriate.
Great. Elena, what about yourself?
Well, I'm also using private chat, and I give them these mini quizzes, but they can answer a few times, and then if they would like to participate in the quiz, I would give them 5 points. If they get it right, then I would give them 10 points. So that's how I try to encourage them to participate anyway. They're not going to lose in that sense.
That's great. I think one of the things, oh, do you want to go ahead?
Well, I'll just get in line whenever you're ready. I have one more idea I want to share.
Well, what I was going to say is, I feel like for the more quiet student, the student that may never say anything in your class and goes in and out, I feel like the chat gives them a little bit of more of a voice, because I think people that are a lot more reserved would be more comfortable in just, because they live in that world of texting, of just sharing that information where they don't feel like they're, on the spot having to talk. So I would just keep that in consideration when you're doing things, as you are giving a voice to some of the students that normally wouldn't speak up. So, but go ahead, Bivin, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just, as you're kind of bringing it into SMUFlex, I'll preface this with the fact that I haven't done SMUFlex yet, but I just went to my classroom the other day, and I was kind of walking around and imagining things, and so I just wanted to share this idea, and maybe somebody can even polish it, way better, so when I actually use it. But I'm teaching a data science course, Introduction to Data Science, brand new course. Putting it together, kind of nice, so I can kind of build it into this new framework. But it's big on presentations. And that's in all the sciences and basically everything, people need to know how to present. And a lot of time that's a kind of a deficit skill that is around. So I'm focusing from day one on presentations. but I'm like, oh, okay, I've got people in class, I've got people at home, but I have this really I'm in Harold Simmons 101A, which has quite a bit of technology in it. And so the idea was that I'm going to basically spin a wheel, but I'll do it in R. So I'll have all the people, all my students, and then I will, I'll end up selecting one of them. And if they're in class, they can come up and, I'm sorry, something's freaking, let me cut this out. Hey, all right. There is, I don't know what's happening. And this, sometimes even that will happen in class. Hang on one second. There's some music.
I can't tell if it's feedback or if it's music or.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, spin it and they'll come up and it's video. So people at home can see people live presenting in class. But if person at home comes in, I can broadcast them and sharing their screen up on Zoom. So I hope it goes as well as I think it's going to be. But whether they're at home or in class, they'll be able to present, and we'll do that every class period. A little async at home, and what are we going to do at the hour and 15 minutes of class? We'll do some presentations. We'll do some group work, and even the people in class will dial in to Zoom breakout rooms with their cohorts at home. So I'm hoping to integrate it that way.
Well, I think that's a great idea as far as absolutely you're able to do the presentation for your online students can go on and easily share their screen, and the audio from the online student will sound through the classroom. We've also tested some where we moved the webcam a little bit, and I'm bringing in from Cox's side. So we have a webcam on a stick. You can kind of move it and they can do their presentation there. You turn on the audio from the webcam. The challenge is going to be like the breakout rooms. And we've done a lot of testing, but what we found is the audio, if you're joining audio, the classroom audio, and then you try to have students log into the breakout rooms or the rooms, it picks up a feedback loop. So you may run into some challenges. I'm not saying it's undoable, but we've tested it out and couldn't get it to work. We would have to cancel the audio when they join the Zoom, or even if they hit mute, that doesn't help because it has to do with the microphone grabbing the audio from the classroom. So you'll have a little bit of challenges. You'll need to test that out. But if you're going to do breakout rooms, it doesn't keep you from still activating a breakout room for your online students. And then your face-to-face students will have to do like face-to-face collaboration, obviously keeping social distancing. But you may have to go that way rather than having everybody join. Again, it's not undoable, but what we found in our testing is there's this feedback we could not get rid of. And even with headphones and it was just kind of a mess. So good luck. If you get it figured out, let us know, honestly. So
I'm going to try something that my colleague James Lake has used for several semesters, and that is group presentations that are evaluated by the class in a peer evaluation setting. So like I can probably evaluate written work, but how to evaluate without bias a presentation. And he says the students love it. He loves it. He has a little bit of control over the grade, in that you get 8% of the grade is whatever you get from your peer evaluations. And then he gives you 1 to 2% based on the number of peer evaluations you actually turn in. And so he's getting kind of a 2-for-1 there. He's getting participation buy-in because you can up your score to 10% by just participating by submitting a rubric or the rubric for each of the presentations. So I'm like excited to try that.
Yeah, one thing, I worked with a professor in marketing we did something similar with peer evaluations in the spring. And what we ended up doing is setting up a Qualtrics survey. So because she was doing everything by paper, and then all of a sudden we're all virtual and you can't do anything with paper. And so she set up a Qualtrics survey and just shared the link. And so all of the students, as they were doing the peer evaluation, they would link to that Qualtrics survey and fill out the information. And so not only did it quickly gave her information, and it was immediately compiled, right? And then you can sort it and do whatever you want with that information. So you may want to consider, if you are doing the peer reviews, looking at using Qualtrics as a tool to collect information.
What James has done, what James did last spring, and he said, and he did it again this summer, is that he set it up in the rubric in quizzes.
Oh, okay.
I showed it to Faye this morning, and she says that's going to work great. So
Yeah.
that way I don't have to learn how to use Qualtrics too.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm more of like a math kind of like number crunching. I want Qualtrics because I can do all sorts of data.
Right.
But yes, absolutely, you could probably kind of configure a quiz to work that way, and Qualtrics again if you want to do a deeper analysis. So there are lots of opportunities that way. So we're close to running out of time. Last bits of advice that you have, Elena, if you want to start on giving faculty, like how are they going to manage collaboration? How can they manage engagement through breakout rooms or really through anything?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think breakout rooms are very useful, but in my case, I only use them for the small class size. So I don't know how it's possible to do it for 280. Probably it's going to be more challenging, but definitely we can create that certain form of communication with students by using these breakout rooms and private chat. Because for me, private chats are also very useful. When I was teaching these courses, they've been quite helpful.
That sounds great. Kathy, what about yourself?
Teaching this summer was challenging, and I anticipate more challenges this fall. And I think that that realizing that we're all going to make mistakes, even though, you know, like Dr. Hayes, you need to share your video or share your screen if you want to be able to us to see what you're doing. And so, Bivin, I'm having the same problem as you have. That's what I encourage people to upbeat.
Awesome. Awesome. And Bivin, what about yourself?
Well, just, I guess, yeah, a parting thought is show your style. Zoom and all these technologies really kind of allow you to unleash yourself. You're going to try things. Don't be afraid to fail. It's inevitably going to happen, but in the end, we'll be way better for it. And the students really, of course, give us a pass and really want they just want to be a part of something. That's what I saw on all those survey that I sent out, is that everybody wanted engagement. Everybody wanted, you know, we're humans. We want to be social, and we can do that over Zoom and with these technologies as well. There was one more thing I wanted to say, but I forgot what it was. But the last thing, one thing is, just as one more style, since it kind of came up, I'll play music as they're coming in, and as you can hear, that was right off my computer. And so as everyone comes in and you know is kind of welcoming, I'll take requests or I'll kind of share some 80s music that they may or may not have heard. But that oftentimes kind of breaks the ice and kind of gets the class primed for some engagement, and just kind of loosening them up and sharing a little personality. So sky's the limit. Get out there and try some of it. Experiment.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I can also add on that since I'm from Russia, even though I'm teaching engineering subject, I always talk about Russian history. So from time to time, we'll watch some videos, we'll talk about scientists, we'll talk about politics, and that also breaks the ice. And then students, they ask some questions about Russia, Russian language, and stuff like that.
Yes, great point. I think humanizing you, you know, and trying to help them have a connection, that you're not just giving them content, but, you know, you're excited. And Bivin, you show that you're excited about your subject. You know, I think that's awesome. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And hopefully that was helpful. It was being recorded. So if you are wanting to see this again, where you registered, you have a button. There will be a button that says watch the recording. And thank you everybody for your time this afternoon in covering this topic. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.